Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of the Surface Tension podcast, celebrating the 30th anniversary of Shobana Jayasingh dance. I'm Sanjoy Roy, dance writer for The Guardian, and over the last 5 episodes, I've been talking to Shobana and to a surprisingly wide range of people who have been involved in her creations. Not only musicians, designers and video artists, but also a professor of virology, an art curator, a robotic engineer and a clergyman. But there's one vital group who I'd really like to explore more, the dancers. So in this episode, I'm asking some of the dancers what it's like to create, develop and finally perform in Shobana's work. And I'm also talking to Shobana about working with the dancers on generating and shaping movement. And together, I hope these conversations will shine a light on the creative alchemy between dance and choreography, which happens in that most mysterious place in the world of dance, the studio. I'm here now with Shobana herself. Can you talk me through what happens for the first time when you and the dancers come together in the studio?
So, coming into the studio is the middle part of the process for me. I also bring in a plan. Most of the times it's taken about 1.5 years in the making. For me, choreography starts with an idea. It actually starts outside the studio and it actually grows. A lot of it grows outside the studio. The choice of a composer is a huge choreographic act in my book. So I bring to the studio all the thinking I've done and sort of preparation, books I've read, films I've seen.
Tell me then what happens in the interaction with the dancers. How do you start actually work on creating material?
When you go into the studio, you kind of enter into a particular stage of choreography, which, one could call movement generation. So basically, you're trying to generate the material with which you're going to choreograph. When I meet the dancers, there are 2 options that are open to people who want to choreograph. One, you can make all the movement yourself on your own body. Then you go to the studio and basically you ask the dancers to copy what you have. And, those movements are obviously to do with what the choreographer's own body can do. And I used to be a bit like that at the very beginning. I used to make things on myself and then I'd go to the dancers, and a lot of what came out of the studio was things that the hallmark was in my physicality. But actually, over many years, I've let that go for many reasons. And really, movement generation I find most creative and enjoyable for myself when I do it in collaboration with the dancers. That's the exciting thing about working with dancers in the studio.
That view of choreographer telling the dancers what to do is a very traditional and old-fashioned one from my point of view. In the 20th century, things started to change, and certainly in the 21st century, there are many more choreographic dancer relationship models. So Shobana belongs to the one of pure collaboration with the dancers, where she gives you a lot of conceptual tasks for you to work with, and then obviously she picks whatever is relevant for the concept she has in mind.
I'm here with Avatara Ayuso, associate artist with Shobana Jayasingh Dance. All the material actually emerges from the group, and you can't tell in advance what it's going to be.
No. We never ever know what the movement is going to be in advance, never. And then she picks up some of the movement, and that starts the vocabulary that specific piece will have.
Really, for me, what I've learned to fine-tune over the years is how does one generate movement that actually look like things that you kind of have in your mind. That's really tricky because, sometimes you don't know the dancer, you don't know what they're going to show you. And sometimes, they show you things which are not useful for you at that point. And of course, you might have 8 dancers and actually only 2 might really kind of gel in that way. So it's not a very democratic process. I don't feel I've got to use everything that everybody shows me. So the movement generation really depends on what methods you use to stimulate movement from the dancer and how you're constantly guiding the production of the movement. So, by saying, oh, that looks really lovely, let's see whether we can do it like this. I think the dancers, they understand, they buy into that process, they realize we're all trying to get somewhere, and what I say makes that path clearer for them. So it's not like, for example, with the Sheila work, you give people 6 pictures of Sheila and say, okay, do whatever you want with it and I'll see you in a week's time. It's actually guided tasking. It's a bit risky because you've got to be prepared for all kinds of things. You've got to be prepared for some people feeling, oh, but I've worked really hard and that's not going to be put in the pool. It's psychologically, I think it's quite subtle how that process of inspiring a group of dancers so that we are in a place where actually we all understand what the vocabulary is going to look like. And for me, that's really the interesting thing choreographically that happens with dancers in a studio.
It's like a love relationship. You start getting to know each other. Of course, you started to see what my physical body possibilities were, but also how my brain was physicalizing her own ideas. And we work together very, very well. Somehow I'm inside Shobana's brain. Of course, she decides what she wants to keep, what is relevant for that specific concept. But my body is ready to help physicalize her vision. And it's very beautiful when you have that connection with someone. And it doesn't happen that often. You need to be with someone for a long time to get to that point of physical, mental conversation and empathy as well.
You actually have a long history of working with Shobana. Tell us a little bit about that connection and how it's continued for many years and what it means to you.
So I started with Shobana in 2007, so it's almost 13 years that I've been working with her in probably all of the pieces. Maybe there is one that I didn't do.
What is it that keeps you with this company for 13 years?
It's certainly being in the studio with Shobana. I love that. And I love the fact that she relies on the body of the dancer. She doesn't give you the movement. It first goes the brain, the thinking, and then the body of the dancer. So for me, it's very important that my personality, it's in the work as well. And my body capabilities are in the work as well. And Shobana allows that. And of course, her mission is to push to those limits where something new emerges from my work. But certainly that moment in the studio when Shobana relies on me and trusts me, that's very important to me.
What do you think that your capabilities and physicality and personality actually are?
I have a very good training, first in classical ballet, then Argentinian tango, and then contemporary dance. So that versatility that shows in my dancing. And I know that's very important also for Shobana, but also for me to express myself. I have a lot of tools to say many things. And I think Shobana has helped me to get to that point where she knows how to use all the potential that my body has, and I know how to give her the performative layer that her work needs.
It's a process that takes a lot of time, and it's never as simple as, okay, you give a task, you get something back, and then, you'll be very lucky if that happens. It's usually much more untidy. Sometimes certain things, you never see anything in the studio that makes you happy. And you kind of think, where am I going? But then suddenly somebody does something, and then that sparks an idea. And then, how to go to the next step. So that's some things I always tell the dancers I work with. It never is a waste of time. Say if we try for 3 days to get something and nothing actually happens, it's never a waste of time, because actually for me it's like a ladder. You have to have a rung. Just because you use it to go to the next rung doesn't mean what you left behind is useless, because it's a place in the journey.
Now I know you've made a distinction between a sequence of movement and a phrase of movement. What is the difference?
Turning a sequence into a phrase, for me, is the most exciting thing, choreographically speaking. Sometimes it's not obvious, perhaps, to the dancer, because they're inside something and I'm standing outside something, so I see things in a different way. I can't see their interiority. I can only see what they're communicating. So a sequence is the first thing that happens when you generate movements, because, if you look at what a sequence is, it's a series of something that occurs one after another. There's a kind of a logic, and a sequence suggests something where there's a relationship between the first thing and the second thing and the third thing. But the logic is the fact that they are arranged in that way. Then I think a phrase is where whatever is together, something conceptual is holding it together. It's got to fit in with the whole picture. It's got to work. So when you've made all those decisions, that to make it into a unison, to take out some gestures, keep the others, put them in some order, that's a very personal activity. You really don't know. You can never explain why you've chosen like that, because the only thing that's guiding you is your sense of, is it effective? it's the exercising of a judgment, isn't it? Based on my eye. So a dancer might show me 6 different moves. They may be in a particular order. That's what I call a sequence. It hasn't become a choreographic phrase till I have taken it and tested it against the concept. That's the sort of choreographic activity that, you hope happens in the studio.
Every single choreographer is different. It's true that Shobana gets very deep into the research, and she loves very much being in the studio with the dancers, and that shows, the pleasure that she's got in spending time with all of us, and the intricacy of the movements and working very closely with you.
That's part of the reason that you're interested in this work, because you're also getting involved in that research.
Yeah, exactly. So things are not imposed onto you. There is a true collaboration. So for me, it's actually a creative collaborator. We are really creative collaborators. Of course, the vision and the latest responsibility is Shobana's. But I find myself more than as a dancer, as a creative collaborator, because she cares so much about the creative process and that relationship with the dancers that you feel very involved.
I'm here with Caterina Carvalho and Estela Merlos from the Shobana Jayasingh Dance Company. Could you tell us a little bit about your background, your training, and how you came to be working with Shobana?
I am originally from Portugal. I was born in Lisbon, where I started dancing. I did all my dance training, then I started working professionally, and then I started doing more contemporary work and working with different choreographers, and then I came to London. And I've been in London for 12 years now.
Your first training in dance was in classical ballet?
I started doing jazz, actually, because I remember watching lots of pop videos on TV, and then I just wanted to, So that's how I started. My teacher then told me, if you want to take this a bit more seriously, you should go and take some ballet classes.
Estela, how about you?
I'm from Barcelona. I started when I was 3 years and a half with ballet training. I did flamenco, jazz, a bit of hip hop, and then I really wanted to pursue my dance career, and I got a scholarship for Central School of Ballet here in London. I came here in 2001. I was in Rambert for 6 years. After Rambert, I decided to go freelance, and I've been working with different choreographers, including Shobana.
It's always a mystery how, when you have a task, say to look at colour or shape or feeling, what do you do with it physically?
You try to put yourself on that skin. With Stage in Chile, I was trying to put myself into the character that I was looking at. In a way, mentally, you try to put your physical being into that tension and anguish. No, in a way, I'm physicalizing it now because it's very hard to explain in words. We're so used to just physicalizing everything. So to verbalize it is a bit like I don't know what words to find.
You try to generate some kind of movement that has a connection with the quality that you're working on.
Totally, that's a great way of saying it.
Shobana
asks for very, very specific
and it's
tasks.
Different every time.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's also challenging for the dancer sometimes, is that you really have to try and understand and grasp the vision and what she's really trying to make us do, really, and make us create all together. So that's, I find that as a challenge personally.
I personally find that with Shobana, because she's so influenced by society and culture and science, I find that when you talk to her, is someone who can talk about anything. You can ask her anything and she'll know about it. And so I think all of that knowledge and intellectual skill of her, it really comes into the process. And you learn a lot of things that perhaps you didn't know, that are not only related to movement, but also life, or humanity. I think that's what makes it, personally working with other choreographers, is that her research is so deep, is so vast, that you learn as well as you go.
This is Surface Tension, the podcast from Shobana Jayasingh Dance, with me, Sanjoy Roy. You can subscribe to Surface Tension on iTunes so you don't miss an episode. And if you are enjoying this series, please leave us a rating or review. Do I say it's Suraj or Suraj?
It's actually Suraj. Suraj Subramaniam, yeah.
Okay. So I'm here with Suraj Subramaniam. Suraj, tell me where you're from, how you started with Shobana's company, and what pieces you remember performing.
So I was born in Malaysia, and did all my preliminary dance training there. Started with Indian classical dance. I moved to Australia and continued actually classical ballet and contemporary dance training, and moved to London in my mid-20s. Was working with a dance company called Srishti, teaching and performing Bharatanatyam for them. And in 2011, at the end of that year, started working with Shobana on their production of Classic Cut. So that was my introduction to working with her company.
So how many styles would you say you have worked in?
I have in my arsenal at the moment Bharatanatyam and Odissi, which I learned side by side growing up. And when I moved to London, I started learning Kathak.
So your first collaboration was Classic Cut, which was a double bill with a new piece, Dev Kahan Hai, and a revival of Shobana's first ever work, Configurations, which we featured in the first episode of this podcast. In this version, I know that Shobana had departed from the classical Bharatanatyam style of the original version. How was that to perform?
Purely from a vocabulary standpoint, while Configurations is, in my opinion, quite a classical piece, Shobana takes the vocabulary of Bharatanatyam and stretches it. So it challenged us as classically trained artists to move outside the kind of parameters of traditional presentation. That was both interesting and challenging and very exciting.
I danced for Shobana in 2017 in the production of Bayadere, The Ninth Life. The company had already produced a version of the show. I was in the 2017 one with a set from Tom Piper. My name is Carmine De Amicis. I'm a freelance dancer in London. I'm also a choreographer. We premiered at the Lowry and then we also performed at Sadler's Wells. And it was incredible. It was 11 performers, 10 different nationalities in the cast, which is exciting.
And what is your nationality?
I'm Italian.
First of all, just tell me a little bit about your own background as a dancer, what styles you trained in, how you came to be in London, and how you came to arrive with Shobana's company for this production.
My journey in dance is a bit particular. I started as a folk and traditional dancer, so I learned European dance forms of dancing, and I then went into a more traditional training in ballroom and Latin dances. Then at the National Ballet School, I trained as a ballet dancer, and I decided to become a contemporary dancer because I saw the DVD of one of Shobana's work, which was Fault Line, and I decided to move to the UK and start my contemporary dance training.
So what was it about Fault Line that attracted you?
I had never seen anything like it at that point, and I found it mesmerizing how much storytelling there was in the body. Like, the bodies were so dramatic on stage, and each movement had something to tell me. I know nothing about the show, nothing about the company, but in a way it really touched me, and I thought, this is a way of moving that I'm interested in.
What did you do with your training when you came to London?
Obviously, as every dancer, I needed to train in more style as possible, just to be able to find different shades within my movement. And so I went back to training and I tried to cover as many styles as possible, because I thought that I needed to be versatile to be able to then adapt my creative voice in order to collaborate with different choreographers.
What do you think is distinctive about Shobana as compared to the others that you may have worked with?
I felt it was very much a collaborative process. The direction was very clear, so the research that she undertook before coming to the studio was very clear, and when we got there, there was a lot of room to investigate creatively, to create the movement palettes and the choreographic language for the show. But at the same time, I also felt challenged intellectually. The movement were important, but also like the reasoning behind the movement became the creative inspiration, which was very interesting. We worked with poetry, we worked with text, we worked with visual references, we worked with many other aspects, not just the body. And then all of these things then translate into movements. And you felt like you owned the process. It felt like we knew where we were going because we had this vision that was Shobana's vision behind us, and we only had to investigate how to translate it in a physical language.
I think in the studio, you need a very skilled person with a very clear vision to be able to bring it together, no, and to take the best of everyone, no. Sometimes can be like a chaos or cacophony, but I always felt working with people like Kamala or Avatar, that was always very inspiring to see people with very different background. We talk about the same thing, but with our own voices. I would say always conducted and directed by Shobana.
I'm here with Jose Agudo, a former dancer with Shobana Jayasingh and currently producing and creating his own work. Jose, tell me a bit about your background, what your training was, how you came to be with Shobana's company in the first place.
So that was at the age of 9, 10, when I started to just watching videos of Fame, West Side Story, Fred Astaire, Ginger Roger. So I think from the early beginning, a lot of things about rhythms was always fascinating me, and the idea of moving and something energetic. I guess that was the first thing. And coming into more teenager age, 16, 17, I started my flamenco training in my city in Granada, with an amazing gentleman called Antonio Vallejo. And then I found myself into a workshop of contemporary dance. That was at the age of 18, 19.
When did you first meet Shobana?
I met Shobana Jayasingh in London. I went to do audition for her. I just straight away I connect with her vision. I remember my wife said, I'm not sure if it's really your style. I said, well, I'm gonna try. I like her, what she does, and the approach was for me different.
Can you remember anything about that audition that made you feel this is where I want to go?
Yeah, I do remember it straight away, because what she wanted was really sharp, straight into your face, I felt like the more I was doing, the more energy I was putting, the more I was connecting with her and she was connecting with what I was doing. For me, that kind of connect with my inner self, I would say, with my temperament of being Spanish, I guess, and growing in south of Spain.
Do you remember the process of creation?
The first thing that struck me from her is how specific and how much she can cut a movement. She will say okay, just maybe this movement from Devraj, this movement from Kamala, and this movement from Jose, and then let's add this from Avatar, And I was like, oh really? But she challenged you in those ways. She likes certain tension. I guess that can come from her Bharatanatyam background and the kind of aesthetic that she's searching for, or at least was the time that I was working with her. But this is something that I love about Shobana. She really takes something and she go with that idea until the end. And I think that is very beautiful for an artist. That is that why she is pushing boundaries always. No, she's always been pushing boundaries and challenging the audience as well.
If there is one thread through Shobana's choreographies that I've been in, that has to be that I haven't experienced one moment where things have been flippant. She hasn't gone, right, we'll just put that there for the sake of it. There's always a reason why something is in a particular time and place. And so that feels to me that she really cares about how the piece is crafted, not just what it looks like from the outside.
Particularly in contemporary dance, which is using vocabulary which is personal. It's not like ballet. People don't recognize the vocabulary. You're asking the audience to listen to a new language and also then read the poem that is being made with the new language. So you're asking people actually to be very, very attentive in contemporary dance. So you're trying to find in dance terms a way of communicating the logic of your movement to an audience to whom the movement is just going to go right, in front of their retina, and then it's lost. So it's moving ever so quickly.
This is Surface Tension, the podcast from Shobana Jayasingh Dance, with me, Sanjoy Roy. So Suraj, in 2015, the duet Material Men was made with you and with Shailesh Bahoran, who is a hip-hop dancer. So you're two completely different types of dancer. How did you prepare for that role?
I guess the crossover point for the two dancers and the choreographer involved in this piece is that all of us come from the diaspora we started the choreography by talking about our personal histories, the histories of our ancestors. So in that respect, they go literally in opposite directions. My ancestors moved eastward to Malaya, and Shailesh's family moved westward to the Americas. And so it's quite a literally divergent experience. That being said, the common thread between it all is the sense of loss and the sense of wondering what might have been. Being a part of the Indian diaspora, you always do wonder if your families hadn't left, what you might have been like, and what are the things you're holding on to, and what is authentic about this experience. This label which you carry, being Indian, what does this actually mean? All these questions sort of get churned up. So when we started the choreography, we, like I said, had conversations about our ancestral histories. We brought in photographs of our families having moved away. And this was the narrative that we were coming to in the piece, and how people were, in a sense, duped into thinking that they were going across the seas for a better future, when in fact they were paid a pittance, a namesake salary, and pretty much used as slaves.
In terms of physical style, you were totally different. How was it to work with somebody who was so different?
Although being quite a tall, lanky person, I'm quite contained. Shailesh, on the other hand, being a hip-hop dancer, he's explosive, he's a little dynamite, and he's also a showman. So to be in the studio with somebody like him, I kept thinking, he's showing me up all the time, so I had to up my game. And then I think drawing from the sort of culture of street dance and hip-hop, Shobana decided to include a small battle, in a sense, in the piece. And so having to challenge myself to go against my idea of this demure or classical dance, I really had to push myself to kind of meet him, yeah.
How does it work together in the studio when you have such different languages, both culturally and in the body?
Obviously, there were many differences in the studio, nationalities, training, but there were also many things that we were sharing. First of all, I think we all came with a creative energy, and we were all like skilled, versatile freelance performers, therefore like able to adapt and change according to the creative process. But with Shobana has been particularly easy because the way that she approaches the dancers, she puts it all on the same level. She feeds with the same amount of information, so you feel like you're starting from the same place. You contribute differently, and obviously we all move differently, we all create differently, but at the end it's Shobana choosing which pieces she wants to put together to create this tableau, this scene.
You learn from each other, and there are things that one dancer understands in one way, and the other dancer understands it in another way, and then in the studio that complements each other. So in the creative process with Shobana, we constantly share material. So I might have created a solo duet, but then two other dancers with a different training will be learning that, so they will bring their own physical personality into that, which is, I mean, it's fantastic. It's like having lots of ingredients to make the perfect dish.
All the dancers that I've worked with have been people who've been curious. So, there have been lovely conversations about why we may be doing those things at that particular time.
How might particular dancers have influenced the direction of your choreography, whether in general or for a particular piece?
I think dancers influence a great deal of the dance choreography, because obviously there are other things which are also part of the choreography. So that bit of choreography that pertains to the dancer, that's totally influenced by the dancers themselves, because it's a gradual and incremental process. I learn more about the dance composition in some ways by engaging with the dancer every day, especially in contemporary dance, because it's so embodied by the dancer. So sometimes, when you have to change casts, maybe that somebody, when you retour it, that person isn't available, it's a big problem, because actually so much is drawn from the physicality of a particular dancer to then change. I mean, sometimes you've got to change quite significantly for it to be authentically embodied by another dancer. So I think the authenticity of the dancer and the way they own the material, that's really what you choreograph with. That's what you're composing. So definitely, the dancer is hugely implicated in the composition of things.
How much of a sense do you have of the whole picture that's maybe in Shobana's mind when you're only a part of that composition?
Now, the last 10 years I've been developing myself as a choreographer, and I always thought, to be a dancer and choreographer was kind of the same thing. And now I realize it's nothing at all the same, because to be outside observing the picture is you are an observer, and I think there are moments that you have to surrender to the picture and to the vision of the person that is outside, in this case Shobana, and you need to trust. As a performer, you have to be busy with what you're doing, no? And you have quite a lot to do already. I would say, yeah, quite a lot to do with that. So it's good to be concerned about the whole picture and see what you can add. And I think in some point as well, you have to surrender to the piece, I will say, and live with it.
It's hard to be aware of the outside look of a performance, of course, because we're in it. But I guess the more we do shows and the more performances we do, the more aware you get of the whole piece as a one thing. Because at the beginning, I'll start with making the dance, we're making the content in terms of the physical contact for it. Then there's all the other elements that come in. The music comes in, we put it together, then we've got a set, we've got the lights, we've got the costumes. So there's a lot of things there that you have to be aware of in order to realize how it looks from outside.
When you come to staging, I feel more and more like a film director because I've got images. And I think the last 2 or 3 pieces that I've made have had more narrative content. Certainly Material Men was about the story of these 2 male dancers, and also the story of indentured labour. With Contagion, that also had, it had the voices of people, and it was in a particular historic context. Sheila, obviously, to do with the man and his life. So there, actually, I felt more like a filmmaker, because I think I tended to have images in my head, and then it's a matter of saying, how does this image go to the next image? What's the transition? Or how am I going to order these images? So thinking about it like a filmmaker probably has been quite helpful.
It's only when probably you get to see the footage of the performance that you realize how you contextualize what you're doing in a bigger picture. That's why it's important as a performer to work with choreographers that you trust, because most of the time the choreographer/director, they will be telling you to do or not do something. You might not understand why. You might not be able to see it because you don't have an idea of the whole picture.
How does it feel to see your dancers delivering the piece before an audience for the first time?
The first time I see a dance piece, I really don't know what I'm looking at, because there's just been so many new things my eye has to adapt to. There's music, and then there's lights, and then there's the set, myriad other things, and then there's that whole unknown element of the audience, and you really have no idea whether they're going to be concentrating, whether they're going to find everything boring. You just don't know. So for me, it takes a bit of time. Sometimes it takes as much as 3 or 4 performances before I really begin to understand what it is that it's all added up to. So it's a bit frightening, really. I very rarely sit with the audience because I'm far too jumpy. In fact, I sit with the technicians at the back where I can sort of have a bird's eye view and not get too emotionally involved. I think the thing that I find with the audience is their concentration. That's what makes me happy. Obviously you hope that they enjoy it and, they applaud the dancers. It's lovely. But you can just kind of feel when people are looking at something and they're just engaging with it. And I think that is just such a privilege to create a situation where 700 people are engaging on this one thing. For that moment, they're looking and they're thinking. What they make of it, one just never knows, because, the audience is hybrid. And you kind of throw it out there and you just feel very honored and privileged that actually people have come to see something you've created, listening to the story you're telling.
More and more, what really changes my life is that connection with the audience. That's the best thing that can happen. Being on a stage or being in a museum, in a gallery, in an outdoor work. You might have just one person, 2 persons. Sharing that moment, nothing can change that, and nothing is more valuable than that communication. It's a direct communication between your body, your soul, your mind with the audience. So that's probably why I continue to communicate with the brilliant audience that is out there.
Thanks for listening to Surface Tension, the podcast from Shobana Jayasingh Dance. For more episodes, subscribe to Surface Tension on iTunes, Visit our website at shobanajayasingh.co.uk or follow us on Twitter at sjasinghdance for updates.